So you know how sometimes, like, the news is just, like, a whole bunch of scary headlines about places you barely even heard of?
Yeah, totally. It's easy to feel like, oh, that's awful, but what am I supposed to do about it?
Exactly. But then, sometimes you hear something that just, like, grabs your attention. Like in that Trendline podcast episode you sent over, the stuff about Israel and Hezbollah, like, that's some serious stuff happening right now, and it's kind of hard to ignore.
Yeah, I mean, those are two names that have been connected to conflict for a long time, right?
So today's deep dive is all about, really understanding why we should even care about stuff that seems so far away. Like, why does it matter to us what happens in the Middle East or, say, Ukraine?
It's about connecting the dots, seeing how those seemingly distant events can actually ripple out and affect our lives in ways we might not expect.
Yeah, exactly. And this Trendline episode is like a crash course in all that. So they jumped right in talking about how Israel might actually be preparing for a ground invasion of Lebanon. And Hezbollah is responding by, get this, firing missiles toward, wait for it, Tel Aviv.
That's a major escalation. I mean, Tel Aviv is like the heart of Israel.
Right. And Trendline made this really interesting point. This isn't just about land or religion or any of the things we usually hear. It's about political power, too. Hezbollah is using this conflict to solidify its grip on Lebanon, even with the country practically falling apart economically. So help me understand this. What exactly is Hezbollah? Like, who are they?
So Hezbollah, you got to understand, isn't just some random militant group. They've got deep roots in Lebanon. They're a political party, a social movement, even runs schools and hospitals. They've been around for decades, fighting Israel on and off. This latest flare-up, it's like another chapter in a really long, really messy story.
Wow. And it seems like the whole world is getting involved. Trendline mentioned the U.S., France, even the UN are all pushing for a ceasefire. But honestly, do you think it'll work?
Well, they mentioned in the episode that a lot of past attempts at ceasefires haven't gone so well. I mean, you've got the U.S., who's obviously tight with Israel, and France, who has this whole history with Lebanon, getting everyone on the same page. It's like herding cats, you know?
Definitely. And it's not just the politics, right? Like Trendline talked about how airlines are already canceling flights because of this. There's like this growing worry about people just trying to live their lives over there.
And that's just the beginning. Imagine the supply chain issues. If things escalate and, say, shipping routes get disrupted, we're talking higher prices for everything. Remember what that Suez Canal blockage did a couple of years back? Same idea, but potentially way worse.
Man, that's scary to think about. And Trendline didn't sugarcoat it either. They flat out said there are, like, rising concerns that this thing could explode into something way bigger. So, like, no holds barred. What's the worst case scenario here?
Okay, so, worst case. We're talking a regional war, maybe even pulling in other global powers. The humanitarian crisis would be off the charts, not to mention the economic fallout. And the worst part, this isn't some far-fetched possibility. We live in a world where, like, everything is connected. What happens over there, it affects us over here. It's just a matter of time until those ripples reach our shores.
Ugh, that is heavy. And speaking of heavy, Trendline didn't stop there. They went on to talk about Ukraine, and this part honestly made my stomach drop. They brought up the possibility of Russia attacking their, get this, nuclear power plants.
And that's where we see a completely different kind of conflict. This isn't your grandpa's war with tanks and trenches. Russia is engaging in what's called hybrid warfare.
Hybrid warfare. Okay, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
It means fighting in the shadows, spreading disinformation to mess with people's minds, launching cyber attacks to cripple infrastructure, holding vital resources hostage like energy. They actually gave the example of Russia shutting down Ukraine's power grid last winter. Imagine an entire nation plunged into darkness in the dead of winter.
God, that's just inhumane.
Exactly. It's about sowing chaos and fear, making people question their own reality. And the thing about hybrid warfare is that it's not bound by any rules. It's unpredictable, it's constantly evolving, and that's what makes it so terrifying.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder if this is the new face of conflict. Less about bombs and more about, like, mind games and breaking the systems we rely on. So we've got two incredibly complex situations, thousands of miles apart, but both have the potential to reshape our world. That's like the main thing I'm taking away from all this.
100%. We're living in a world where the old lines, like the ones on a map, they don't really matter as much anymore. We're all interconnected, and that means taking the time to understand these complex issues, even if they seem far away, because trust me, they're not.
Wow. It's a lot to wrap your head around, but you explained it all really well. This has been eye-opening, to say the least. Thanks for joining me for another deep dive. We'll be back soon with more. In the meantime, stay informed, stay curious, and most importantly, stay engaged. because the more we understand about the world around us, the better equipped we are to navigate whatever comes next.